second day of the week here. Everybody's still kind of gearing up for the week, getting started, and we're looking at the forecast models. So next week is going to be kind of an active weather week as far as what I'm seeing. So we're going to kind of break that down a little bit, and we're going to go over that a little bit and see what's going on here. There are some changes, actually. I made a video yesterday of this with some of the tropical tidbits models. Mostly GFS because GFS can see this far out, and it's a pretty good look at what is to come as far as an extended forecast. So the GFS told us yesterday that we had some weather coming, but it seems like there's some changes to this. Okay, so we're gonna go over that real quick and go over the timelines as well. All right, we're looking at precipitation type rate going across the U.S. here into next week. This is looking at the 5th now. We're going into the 5th in the morning hours. You can see these kind of like little spin up here of some of the rain showers that's going into the Great Lakes region up here. This is going to kind of conjoin with this kind of cold front. It's not really cold frontal air. It's just really cold air up here, and it kind of meshes with this, and then you get snow conditions up here. So going into the next frame, you can see that kind of building up a little bit. And then you start to see that red that's up there. So we got a lot of snow conditions and a lot of winter conditions moving up into Wisconsin and Michigan, and that areas there in the Great Lakes region. Not hazardous weather. There's no severe weather with this, but there's going to be a lot of that rain and snow mix. Right now, this doesn't look that bad. There's no real threat on here and everything like that, but there is going to be rain. So rain, and then once it gets up into Wisconsin, then you start to get some of that snow that's going to be building in that area, and as well as rain. In the green areas here, the green shaded areas, you see a lot of rain here, but as it's so close to these red conditions here, that's that rain and snow mix that you're going to get. So a little bit of freezing rain, some sleet possibly, and some rain and snow mix until it gets up into these colder temperatures. Then it's just going to be snow. And anytime that you have that kind of situation there, there's going to be ice. So please be safe up there in the northern states where it's going to be still a little chilly. It's still got some cold conditions that are continuing on. All right. Now the other side of this coin is we start to see this low pressure system moving into the central U.S. right here. We start to get these storms that are building up right here. All right. Now this is the kind of change from the GFS from yesterday, because this didn't look the same yesterday that it did today. All right, so you see these storms that are kind of like building up here in Nebraska, and the one thing that kind of alerted me about it is that we do have some supercell development with that. We have nice break in the caps. We got a nice wind field right here, nice straight organized wind field, a little bit of curvature on it there. We got some hooking and the hydrograph as well, and some hail that is possible. All right, so our wind fields are around the 50s. It looks like surface to 8 kilometers, 50 knots, somewhere around there, and wind profiles, which is enough. It's enough to get some rotation going on. And then we also have some instability in there, almost 800s and 800 joules in Cape almost. Our dew points aren't doing a whole lot. We're around the 50s, but still, it's enough for some severe weather to roll out. Especially if you get some supercell development, it might be on the lower end, and some smaller tornadoes, and maybe possibly some mid-sized tornadoes. You might get a stovepipe or two out of this. I don't know, but I'm just saying some of the tornadoes, some of these tornadoes might be possible in that area. All right, so this thing kind of breaks off and it moves up to the northeast. So you get some winter weather on the northern end of this, where we're getting some snow. And then on the southern end of it right here, it's kind of wrapping around this low, because you get kind of a lee cyclone kind of situation going on here, like a land cyclone situation going on here. All right, so with that, this storm is just kind of moving around it. So it's a very, very limited amount of time that we start to see some of those storms building up into that kind of severe risk. All right, so going across kind of like the eastern areas of Nebraska, then we see some of that threat just kind of linger there as this low is moving across. Once it gets up into Iowa, and then it gets up into lower Minnesota there, starts to turn into winter weather. All right, so limited time around the evening of the 5th, and then into the 6th, it looks like we do have a possibility for some severe weather in eastern Nebraska, and then it eventually moves out. So a brief spin-up tornado or two, may be possible. I mean, Nebraska has been known to have some pretty sizable tornadoes from time to time. So, but it doesn't look like that kind of system to me. It looks like it's going to be a relatively low tornado threat. But with the supercell development that could be possible in this area, a little bit of a larger tornado or two might be possible. So definitely a time to be weather aware on the evening of the 5th and then into the 6th in the overnight periods. And then by the morning hours, it seems like it's going to move out. We're looking at the 00Z hour right now. So it's going to move out of that area. And you still got some isolated cells that are popping up across Iowa as well. That marginal tornado risk does carry over just a little bit, for a limited time, but that kind of curvature right here in this wind field, got a nice stable wind field down here. All right, so that is a little bit alarming. Got a little bit of hooking structure that's going on there too. So some rotation is still possible through some of these isolated cells, moving through this region into the Ohio Valley and then up into the Great Lakes region eventually. So what we see here, and then turns into winter weather to the north, where we're just getting rain and snow mix. You see those disturbances in the wind field up here too. So eventually, that just kind of loses that organization for severe weather, and then moves out of that region up into Michigan and Wisconsin. Those areas in the Great Lakes turns into winter weather. Then we start to see these cells popping up down here. All right, and that's the beginning of our second round of storms that's going down here, and it's moving into Kentucky. It looks like you get a little bit of that tail, that squall line. Not really a whole lot of serious threat right at the beginning, but let's see what happens here. Then we start to get these this line of storms that's kind of building up here. All right, not a whole lot with these from the north. This is that first initial round of rain showers, general thunderstorms. Not really too much to be seen here. All right, so not severe, sub-severe kind of weather and everything, and just kind of rain showers. It's just going to be kind of a dreary, nasty day. And some rumbles of thunder and lightning might be possible from here and there. Some higher wind profiles might be possible with some of these storms, so you might want to be a little bit careful about the wind profiles. Looking at about 70 knots surface to 8 kilometers, about 60 surface to 6 kilometers. It looks like this is just a generality, but some higher winds could be possible with some of these storms, so definitely make sure that your items outside and things like that are kind of hatched down, as some damaging winds could be likely, could be possible across the regions of Kentucky, going into Virginia, some of the lower Ohio Valley states, and then into Pennsylvania as well. Some of those areas there could have some damaging wind gusts. All right, so now we're moving into our second line of storms here. We start to see that develop going into Oklahoma, eastern Oklahoma right here, and into the Missouri line. Starts to get a little bit on the marginal severe side. That's going up into Oklahoma. But look at this curving. We got a light, we got some good hooking structure that's starting to pop up and develop here. But look at our profiles. Our wind profiles are 92 knots, surface to 8 kilometers. That's what the GFS is anticipating. Our instability isn't really there yet in Oklahoma yet. So this is that kind of thing that I've talked about in a lot of videos, where it seems like it stays pretty sub-severe and doesn't really develop until it's past this Missouri and Arkansas line. Once it gets past this line right here, that's right on the eastern line of Texas, this whole line right here, it gets east of that, and then it gets into this wet, soppy environment where it's warm. Get that warm sector in there, and those dew points up there around 60, gets in that really unstable environment, and then those caps start breaking, and those storms start developing around Missouri right here. All right, so northern Missouri, it looks like you're going to have some marginal severe risk. It doesn't say that right here, but, there is a little bit of curving that's in some of these structures, but not really alarming to me. But look at our wind profiles. Our wind profiles are almost 100 knots going across this area. Surface to 6 kilometers, getting some really nice steep wind profiles. So definitely a trough system moving through that's going to be doing some forcing and some ridging. You see that kind of curvature in those fronts right there, and that's going to be pushing to the east. So you're getting some forcing that's going through here, and it's going to it's going to make for some windy conditions, which isn't good by the time you start to see this right here. And in these lower states, especially Arkansas, Louisiana, some of the Gulf states, maybe some of these states here where you're getting that advection, you're getting some theta E that's moving in here. So you're getting a southern draw, southern flow that's going in there as well, mixing with some of that wind, and then not to mention feeding up a lot of moisture. All right, so we start to see in the next frame, we start to see this is around the 7th. Looks like in the overnight hours of the 6th into the 7th, we start to see this line of storms that starts to develop here. Let's look up in northwest Arkansas. And our wind profiles are not as high here, but our instability is kind of rising a little bit. And our wind is starting to organize a little bit. We're getting a little bit more curving in that hydrograph there, a little bit more hooking structure. Up into the Ohio Valley, we got some big storms that are raging through there. Marginal tornado risk with these. All right, up in the Ohio Valley, getting some hooking in this hydrograph here. So gets some critical angles, got hooking here as well. Wind profiles around 62. Our dew points around 57. All right, so we got, high 50s to 60s in dew points. It's already a wet sector. All right, so in this area here, it's all going to really depend on temperature and just the way the storm moves through this as well. Looks like our updrafts are going to be kind of supportive too. We're getting a little bit of that hooking in this hydrograph as well. Wind profiles around the same, 60 to 70 knots. Getting some nice flow in that wind field there. It's nice and stable. Caps are broken. It looks like the heat, there is a little bit of heat that's in this area as well. A little bit more moisture than there is heat, but there is heat, there is moisture, and our instability is probably about enough for some severe weather to possibly roll out. So going into these areas up here in the Ohio Valley, I would say a brief spin-up tornado or two could be likely, could be possible throughout this area. All right, so further to the south, going through Missouri, we're looking at around mid-Missouri here, and we get some marginal severe risk. Looks like general thunderstorms in some of these areas here. You could get, anywhere along this line, you could have some brief spin-up tornadoes because anywhere in this line of storms, there could be supercells embedded anywhere, up and down in this. I mean, just the way this line is looking right here, with some of that theta E advection that's flowing into the country here, it'll probably be going up. It'll probably go up to about Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, some of those areas before it really starts to wind down. It'll be a lot less this far into the country, but we already have that wet, like I said, we already have that wet sector. We got this ridging and this forcing that's going behind here with the cold front behind the storms. It's going to be forcing out here from the west. We got theta E coming in from the south. That's going to help your rotation possibilities here. A lot of things going into this kind of soup mix of ingredients here. All right, so anywhere along this line, you could have embedded supercells in here, and if you have embedded supercells, you could have embedded tornadoes. It could be that kind of situation. I don't think that it would be a massive outbreak kind of situation, but I think one or two tornadoes could be possible anywhere along this line of storms, and that's the way the GFS is looking right now. So I can't really get there yet to say that this is going to be an outbreak or anything like that. The data might change, and if I do see that, then I will let you know. Eventually, I will definitely let you know. Okay, this looks like an outbreak situation, but this doesn't look like an outbreak right now. Not yet. It just looks like there's a massive pocket of instability. Got hooking in the hydrograph here. We got 70 knots somewhere around there, and wind profile 607, most unstable cape. Dew points in the 60s. Caps are broken. Nice stable wind field. Marginal tornado risk going across parts of Arkansas and in the southern kind of regions of this. Next frame here. This line of storms starts to get a little bit more broad towards the northeastern states here. And when that happens, then you start to get that general thunderstorm. Still getting nice stable wind field, so it's going to be one of those windy days up there, but then it starts to break apart. You start to get some of that general thunderstorm mix, all right? So torrential rainfall might be possible, a couple rumbles of thunder and lightning, definitely some windy conditions going into these areas up here, but not a whole lot of threat. The threat definitely goes down as far as the risk level. All right, so now looking south into where this storm becomes a little bit more narrow and isolated. You see how kind of tight that line of storms is at, or that's where you start to worry a little bit, where you're still getting some of that marginal severe risk that's left over. A lot of the wind profiles. Now, the instability is not as much in this area, but that we're still getting a little bit of hooking structure, which is going to say a lot for the southern regions of this storm, where you're going to get probably most of that rotation. All right, so let's check out around the central kind of portion of this storm here in the middle. Then you start to see a little bit of a well, about the same picture. Actually, it's not really that bad. Marginal severe risk with this, but the wind profiles are real steep. Not a whole lot of instability, and that curving is probably not going to do much with kind of that limited instability in that area. So it's probably still a little bit chilly up here despite the warmth that is in this kind of wet sector up here. But let's look a little bit further south. We're going to go around to about the Arkansas Missouri line. Then we start to see on that southern end of the line that marginal tornado risk still left over. The caps are broken. Nice amount of moisture in this area. A little bit of heat that's in this area as well. So you're getting a warm, wet sector in this area here, and that's going to help your instability. We're still looking around 418 in most unstable Cape. That's just a generality, and I think, honestly, an assumption. I think if we look at the high-res model closer to the event, that might be a little bit of a different number. All right, so because our dew point's around 60, 61, something like that, and it's not considering a lot of the theta E that might be going into this area. Going across Arkansas on the southern end of this says marginal severe risk in that spot, but let me see if we do a little bit further north, then you start to see marginal tornado risk. So there's a big difference between about, between a half inch on this map. You know what I mean? Then we see a very different picture. Our most unstable cape is around 300 in this sounding, but you know what I mean? With 300. I mean, this might be different, like I said on the HRR model. Otherwise, we wouldn't be getting a marginal tornado risk with this, But our wind profiles are steep. Our dew point's around 63. It definitely says warm, wet sector of unstable atmosphere. So this definitely could be possible where you can get a tornado or two out of this going across Arkansas. Damaging wind gusts possibly, more than likely actually. Torrential rainfall, thunder and lightning with this as well. And as well, too, it's not anticipating this, but you could get some hail makers out of this going across some of these states. Missouri, Arkansas, Texas, anywhere along this where you're still going to probably have cells down here in this kind of green shaded area. And the GFS isn't really picking that up at this time, but you could have some hail makers going across here. Look, we're already getting marginal tornado risk and supercell development going into eastern Texas. Look at the amount of heat and moisture that's in this area. I mean, that boost in heat and moisture right there, that is warm, wet sector, unstable environment. Look at this, over 1,000 joules of CAPE in most unstable CAPE. We're getting 926 of surface CAPE. You know what I mean? So there is more than enough instability and flow there to really get things spinning up. Dew points around 60. We're getting 56 knots somewhere around there, and wind profiles surface to 8 kilometers. So there is definitely just a pocket of instability just kind of sitting there. And it's probably from a lot of this theta E. So going to the next frame, we're looking at the morning 09Z on the 7th. Then you start to see these storms kind of moving into the Ohio Valley, going into Illinois and Indiana. It's going into Indiana right now in this frame here. Like I said, not a whole lot going on with this because the northern portion of the storm is starting to kind of widen out, get a little bit more broad, and it's starting to kind of lose that that severity. So it's just becoming kind of general thunderstorms and just rainy conditions. And where these see, the thing is, these Ohio states, they get a little bit of both. You know what I mean? They're getting a little bit of that kind of cool weather that's still left over from the north, but then they're getting a kind of flushel of a little bit of that warmth up from the south. So it's kind of like a mixture here, and it definitely causes a lot of thunderstorms. It doesn't necessarily always mean tornadic storms. So, but this is kind of packing so much down here in the south that it seems like this is going to be absorbing a lot of that energy, especially with the front that's right here. There's a front right here that's going to be behind the storms, pushing this along to the east, and then theta E advection coming up from the south. And that's what is making the southern portion of the storm so possibly dangerous. All right, going into Kentucky, just ahead of the line of storms. It doesn't say that we have a whole lot of instability here, but not a whole lot of green. And there is a little bit of bowing structures in these storms right here. So not a lot of green right here. Damaging wind gusts are likely. going ahead of this line right here. You know, when they're real tight and everything, it's a real fine line of green like that, and get a little Boeing structure, sharp edge, and a lot of damaging winds ahead of that. Definitely possible. Going into northwestern Tennessee, same thing. Not a whole lot. It seems like that instability hasn't really gotten there yet. Let's go a little bit further south, just on the Mississippi line. Instability is a little bit higher. Let's see what happens. Well, we've still got some of this here going through southern Arkansas, mid to southern Arkansas. Seems like that marginal tornado risk is still kind of carrying over a little bit. Still getting about 654 most unstable Cape, which is more than enough instability for a tornado or two to kind of roll out, or some of those storms would be a little bit more on the severe side. Next frame here, we go into about the 12Z hour of the 7th, it looks like. All right, and these storms are kind of moving through the Ohio Valley. Then you start to see some of these this line of storms making that Boeing structure here. Our wind profiles are up 62, around the 60s in most unstable Cape, but not very unstable in Kentucky, so that is a good thing. General thunderstorms with this, probably torrential rainfall, thunder and lightning, the usual hazards as far as thunderstorms, but not a whole lot of threat there. Then you start to see that most unstable Cape rise just a little bit, so we're getting closer to that unstable area. We're going to check out the surface Cape as well through this entire event, so we can see the peak areas where that instability is going to be at. Now going into northern Mississippi, then you start to see, yeah, you see that most unstable Cape kind of rise a little bit more, about another 100. The wind profiles aren't doing a whole lot. I mean, yeah, we do have some wind out here, but it's lower than what we were seeing before. 62 in dew points, so definitely still pretty wet. All right, going across southern Arkansas, kind of on that southern line. Then we still got some marginal severe threat. Our Cape is a little bit higher. Still getting curving and hooking in the hydrograph. A lot of moisture down here. Northern Louisiana now, just ahead of that, getting some severe risk. Um, Definitely higher instability, probably because it's really a lot warmer in Louisiana. I mean, anybody who lives in Louisiana knows one thing about Louisiana: it's warm and it's wet. It's warm and it's humid. That's the thing about Louisiana. Just warm and sopping humidity. You know, that's verbatim Louisiana. So, let's see here. Now, this line of storms, it looks like it's kind of widening out and it's starting to become a little bit more broad, more isolated, it's starting to lose its kind of punch a little bit. Definitely looks that way to me, but still a little bit of a sharp line of green going ahead of the line of storms here. That kind of tells me there's not a whole lot of rainfall ahead of the line of storms, but definitely in the line of storms. That could say a lot about your damaging wind gusts. All right, so yeah, our wind profile is around 60s up here. So in these areas, where you have this sharp, fine line of storms right here, and not a whole lot of rain ahead of it, that's when you get those conditions where just ahead of that line, it can be nice and quiet, not a whole lot of wind going on, real calm and everything. And then as soon as that line of storms comes, then you see that wind just jump up a couple of notches real quick. You know, it's just kind of like that kind of just wall of wind that just kind of blows over the area, and then you start to have some damaging wind gusts. And that's kind of the situation here with this kind of fine line where there's not a lot of rain, not a lot of little green haze ahead of these storms here. So definitely be mindful of the damaging wind threat going into these areas. All right, so and then yeah, as this storm kind of moves to the east, it seems like it kind of tapers off in its severity. Let's look down here in Missouri, though, or I mean Mississippi, excuse me, where we're still going to get some of that tornado risk. All right, so we do have a lot of moisture, a little bit higher in the atmosphere, up to about 6 kilometers in the atmosphere. Stable wind field, about 700s in Cape, and about 60s in dew point. Looking about 50s, could be 50 to 60 in wind profiles, and definitely some hooking in the hydrograph. All right, but then next frame starts to become more isolated and spotty in its cells, moving into Alabama. Marginal severe risk moving into Alabama, it looks like. and this is going into the later kind of afternoon to evening hours of the 7th, into that kind of time frame. All right, marginal to the southern. Yeah, a lot of these cells that's going to be in the southern portion of the storm because of how much wind that we've got in this area and moisture. Look at the moisture and the heat in here. As soon as it moves into Alabama, it seems like that ramps up quite a bit, and it's probably due to a lot of that theta E. This is that point here where the GFS is actually making considerations for a lot of the theta E advection that could be going into this area here. We're getting 588 and surface surface cape profiles, which is definitely more than enough. 60s and dew points, about 60s and wind profiles here. So definitely enough wind, hooking in the hydrograph critical angles here. All right, so definitely with some of these spotty cells, any one of these could be supercells at this point. And then it's that highway, that tornado highway that's going across Alabama right here. You know, basically from Tuscaloosa to Birmingham, that's kind of like that tornado highway where it seems like all these storms, they kind of, come into Alabama and they just kind of hang out right in that spot. That's like, the one spot right there in the center of the state here where it's just most unstable. Tuscaloosa to Birmingham, I mean, how many tornadoes have we seen form up in that exact area? You know what I mean? It's just thousands, and throughout history, that's just a famous, geographical position for tornadoes to form up. So definitely we're going to have to watch for Alabama here as those isolated cells move into Alabama. I mean, half an inch. Look, clicking half an inch could be marginal severe risk, could be marginal tornado risk. Definitely don't know. But once we get closer to the event through the HRR model, this threat could jump up a couple of notches, and it could go from a marginal tornado risk to simply straight up a tornado risk. All right, so we're going to have to check the instability levels closer to the event. I'm going to be looking at them all week this week just to see the updated information. And then once I get some concrete updated information, I'm going to let you guys know what is up going into these storms here. All right, so then it kind of moves out to the east and it moves into North Georgia, probably just as rainstorms and general thunderstorms. Marginal severe risk, it looks like. Cap is really broken at this point because it's just been in this wet sector, this wet warm sector for a while here. Hooking is starting to kind of taper down and dissipate, and it's kind of losing its structure. But look at our wind profile. Still going to have some windy conditions going into Georgia and the further eastern states here. So definitely still, batten down the hatches for some damaging wind gusts possible. All right, so all right, I'm gonna go back to. We're gonna go back and we're gonna look at some of the instability levels here, going to the Cape and everything like that. All right, I'm going to start right about here. Let's go to severe weather. We're going to go to surface-based Cape. Let's take a look at what our Cape is doing here. All right, where those areas in Nebraska that I was talking about, that low kind of moves in right here, and then you start to see that kind of Lee cyclone kind of situation go around, and our Cape is moving into Iowa, moves into Illinois a little bit, and then eventually starts to taper off and dissipate. But then you start to see this Cape kind of developing from a lot of the Cape that's in the Gulf of Mexico, which the Cape is always usually very high in over the Gulf of Mexico because of how warm it is down there, and a lot of that moisture. Then you start to see these Cape levels rise. Looks like just following kind of all the way across the storm, moving with the low pressure system, and of course the front that's behind it, where you're getting some of that forcing. That Cape kind of moves up there. We're getting, over 1,000 in a lot of these areas as far as Cape. All right. What are we looking at? The 703Z. So that Cape kind of goes up and down until it reaches. It should jump up. Yeah, there it goes. Okay, so that Cape kind of jumps up with some of that advection going into the Gulf states. And then, yeah, it kind of travels a little bit further east across Alabama and into Georgia and eventually backs off and back into the Gulf of Mexico as these storms, by this time, these storms are moving out to the Atlantic. They're moving east. They're being pushed out by the front that's behind them. Seems like that Cape is just still kind of lingering there, you know what I mean? A little bit over South Georgia and into South Carolina. So could have some still some thunderstorm development and some periodical rain showers in some of those areas. Even with the high Cape there, I don't think that there's a lot of severe potential and risk with that as in those areas. All right, I'd be more worried about what's going through the central U.S. for a periodical kind of period of time there, and then into the Gulf states as well. Tropical tidbits, I had this pulled up for our dynamics, looking at our dew points. So we're going to see what kind of dew points that we got going on here. Looking at, this is today, but let me go a little bit further. And let's go into the 5th. And then you start to see that Lee cyclone kind of situation moving up in here with the low. You can see that wrapping around right there. And that's where that low pressure system is, right here. All right, and then, but look at our dew points in here, all the way in the 50s, mid 50s to close to the 60s. We got that really warm, wet sector that's moving into this area here. 60s in the south. There's that warm, wet sector right there, just moving in. And you can see those wind profiles that are coming up from the south. This is that theta E advection. You're actually seeing that theta E advection that is being flushed up into the Gulf states and into the southern regions of the U.S. right here, the deep south. That's all that theta E advection that's moving in. You can see the front that's right here. This is the cold front pushing this storm off to the east, kind of moving off there. But even after that, look at our dew points, still in the 40s to 50s, still kind of wet there. But it moves a lot of that really steep dew point advection. It's just kind of pushing it out to the east. And eventually, as that kind of cold moves in, it pushes a lot of that dew out. And we get that kind of cold wave blowing across the U.S., even in some of the deep south states, where you're going to get some chilly weather there. All right, so let's go back and look at some more stuff. Let's look at some vortice and wind going across this area. Let's see some of these wind profiles that are going on. Oh, why are we yeah, let's go up a little bit more. There we go. We start to see those wind profiles there. There's that kind of Lee cyclone kind of situation that we're seeing here, moving in with the low pressure system. And then you start to see some of these red indices here where the winds, definitely the wind shear could be a lot higher in some of these areas here. And then we get these higher indices of wind and vortice. This is primarily surface vortice is what we're looking at right here, and it's kind of going across this area. I see a lot of vortice in this area here, and some of these yellows and reds. So that definitely leaves a lot of room for things to get spinning up and rotating, which isn't really a good thing. But we're looking around the 7th here with our severe weather. Then you can start to see that, you know what I mean? Oops. Start to see that with some of that surface vortice that's going on through the country here. This is going to be carried along with all those severe storms. You can see some of those dark red areas of surface vortice right there, just picking it right up. Yeah, pretty good storm moving into the area here. Let's look at 850 millibar height and wind. Then you can see, yep, a lot of that wind shear that's going on there. You can see that flow, that southern flow that's moving up in here. And a lot of that wind shear just kind of taking off. A lot of height falls with this as well. So, yeah, definitely going to be a good storm. 250 millibar wind. You can kind of see a little bit about what the jet is doing a little bit there. You see that curvature in the jet there, and as this kind of system, kind of heads south, it has this like kind of bowing to it and everything. And it's going to be a lot of that forcing and that ridging kind of situation where it's just kind of moving through that whole entire system, moving off to the east and just kind of forcing there. That's what's really making a lot of wind shear in this area. So with all that wind shear, definitely a good situation for some spin-ups and some rotation. So especially with this whole system just kind of moving off to the east here. Yeah, that movement is it's pretty rapid, and it's pretty strong. It's pretty strong movement as far as that is concerned with some of the building storms. Definitely some strong movement with this. So yeah, we do have some severe storms coming. It could be a little bit more severe than what the GFS actually has told. Looking at the wind shear and some of the other indices here. All right, so definitely I'm going to keep you guys updated throughout the week on some of these storms and see what the updated model data gives us. And if anybody has any questions or anything like that, feel free to comment on this video or just message me at on this site here and I'll definitely help you out. All right, so I'm going to keep you updated. Be safe, everybody. Have that plan in place and everything. Be prepared for around the 5th to the 7th. Gonna get some storms, and I hope everybody has a good week. Thanks for